Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the WriteHer podcast, a series where Kathy Douglas and myself, Jillian Brander, talk about pretty much whatever we want: change, writing, grammar, communication, and career advice, all of the above. So, today, our topic of conversation is coping with change. Kathy and I today have a lot of different experiences. I just turned 30. You just turned, what did you say? You just had a recent birthday. Happy belated birthday to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm
And
retirement age now, so we'll
uh,
just leave it at that.
yes, exactly. So um, I feel like this topic of coping with change is something that everybody in every demographic and in throughout their life is just something that we all happen to deal with, whether we plan for it or not. So today, let's chat about some things that you're going through right now and some things. I just turned 30, like I said. So it's definitely a life change for me and just a mentality. But yeah, let's talk about Kathy Douglas Incorporated and some of the changes that are coming with that. So turn it over to you, Kathy.
Okay. Well, I'm heading into semi-retirement. So I do still take assignments, but I'm being much more picky about what kinds of assignments I'll take and from whom.
Mhm.
Um, I feel very fortunate to be in the situation that I'm in where I can do that.
Mm.
I'm not um, wedded to the idea of earning a certain amount of money every month, which is very nice. It's a wonderful place to be. And I'm transitioning age related. So transitioning into semi-retirement from, a pretty full, almost frantic work life. So it's been challenging to kind of slow down and understand that I don't have a lot of deadlines. I
Mm.
don't have a lot of appointments. I don't have people breathing down my neck to get
Right.
an assignment from. And so this transition has been very interesting to me in that it's not easy. And I always thought, well, when you retire, then, you can do all the things that you've always wanted to do, and you just transition right into them and you just leap right in and enjoy your retirement. And what I'm finding is it's not that easy. It's a downshift in energy.
Hmm.
It's a transition into a different kind of calendaring, you know. Um, there's lots of open time, which is great, but if you're used to having your time scheduled, all of that open time can seem very intimidating.
Right.
So what I'm finding is the transition is not as easy as I thought it would be. Um, my daughter was talking about it and she said, when you said transitions, I thought you meant writing transitions. And
Mm.
she said, most people aren't very good at that. And I said, it's exactly like that because
Right. What a great analogy.
I thought so too. And it's like transitioning from one idea to the next idea, um, and doing it well and seamlessly is really a challenge. It's a challenge as a writer, and it's a challenge, as a human being. So I thought that was a really good analogy.
That's so true. Transitions, I feel like for me, are the hardest thing in any type of narrative, report, brief, even just transitioning to a call to action. And I feel like we forget that life has its own transitions, even whether it's age, whether it's career and retiring or semi-retiring. What do you think are some of the things that you didn't expect from this life change?
I think I didn't expect to feel so overwhelmed.
Mm.
And when I say overwhelmed, I mean there's lots of free time. So, what of the many, many interests that I have do I select for today?
Mhm.
Do I want to work in the garden? Do I want to go to the movies? Do I want to call a friend? Do I want to um, do some crafting? There's like a million things that I want to do, and I guess it's two things. It's having an unscheduled block of time, but then I have too many interests, so I'm trying to have to cull down what's doable, what can I do right now, what needs to be planned for the future. And all of a sudden it just feels kind of overwhelming. And I think a lot of that is it's personal choice.
Right.
Whereas before, you're dictated to by your employer or your clients or what have you, and this is your own choice. So um you take the initiative to schedule things, and um I'm just feeling a little overwhelmed, and I didn't expect that at all, from this
Right.
transition.
It's almost like I'm the same way as you were explaining, like overwhelming with the things to do, or even just the time. And it can be daunting, like how do I spend my time? How do I think accomplishments are one thing that you know have helped me with time, because even having a time off from work, there were certain things like gardening. I wanted to plant this because you can actually see literally the fruit of your labor. Ha,
Right,
figurative.
right,
So having that type of like feel good, like this is what, having a time to be able to come back and say, like I've been saying to myself, what do I find joy in, and how would I not measure joy versus accomplishments, whether it's
right,
getting
exactly.
groceries
That's a
done, or
great point. That's a
like,
great point.
can I spend some of
Oh,
my time just on reading where there's no accomplishment involved, but hey, I can finish a chapter and that makes me feel productive. Like that's one of the things that I did in my time off too, was just like
right. Well,
take
you've had a lot of changes in a
oh,
row. I mean, you turned 30, but you also got married.
yeah, I did.
So, I mean, those are two huge things
Yeah.
right in a row. So you've
Right.
had a lot of adjustment to do.
Yeah, it's not as different as I thought, but I think like the change of realizing, my mom always said, like marriage isn't for you, it's for the other person. Like how can you support this other person, and you know uh support the best for them and things like that. So I think a lot of it's just like teamwork, you know dealing with that, and then having to say like, oh, what do they say, like who's the chef and who's the sous chef. Like I always want to be the chef, so I've had to learn how to like step back and be a helper,
Yeah,
rather than talk about things I don't know what I'm talking about, or
yeah.
plan things that where others could have better ideas,
I think that idea of relinquishing control
oh,
is probably a big change for me with the semi-retirement.
mm,
I'm used to controlling so much of life, and now because there are so many choices, it feels like I'm out of control a little bit, even though the paradox is that actually now I control more all my time,
mm,
but I don't know whether that makes sense, but it's kind of that lack of control, because my
yeah.
daughter once said, I said, well, I like to drive Emma because when we go places, because um I forget what I said, was I think I had the handicap permit or something, and she said, no, mom, you like to drive places because you're a control freak. And I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, should I be offended? And then I thought, no, I said, Emma, you're absolutely right.
Yes. It's the little things too. Like I am the same way. Like if I can control the time, the appointments, the prep time, the time it takes to plan it, I'm that way too. So I mean, oh, the driving and control. Talk about change. You never know what's going to happen when you get on the road, and that's the thing that makes me feel most in control in my commute every day. So I think too with kids like my sister you were talking about, having young children versus when they're older, watching my sisters really focus in on like they have to be here at soccer practice at this time, then they have to be here and this is what they have to do. And then you were saying when, kids are older, like relinquishing that control might be a test of coping with change
Oh,
as
it's
well.
it's terrible. It's terrible because you want to just jump in and solve all of their problems. But these are adults, and you have to realize they need to make their own mistakes. They need to make their own choices. They have their own victories, and you can share as much or as little of that with them as they will allow.
Right.
But unless you're asked directly for your advice or your ideas, it's best to just keep your mouth shut. And I am not very good at that.
So funny. I love that. Yeah, I mean, I love my mom. It's like reminding me of my mom too. She was texting me today, I miss you, I miss your face. So I stopped off after work. But yeah, I mean, relinquishing sort of what you have or, to have to say is like one of the biggest challenges. And then realizing that, all the time and all the change that they went through paid off.
Right, right. And that's what you have to trust that they were raised well, that you did your very best with them. And you also have to acknowledge that every parent makes mistakes. I mean,
Oh,
children do not come with an owner's manual. They are every kid is new. I had three of them, and all three of them are totally different than each other. So what worked with one didn't necessarily work with the other.
mhm.
And they all turned out, the minute that the third one graduated from college, my husband and I have had like a little party because no more tuition, no more books. It was really a big relief financially. And we felt like we wanted our kids to have that accomplishment. So once they accomplished that, we felt like,
You accomplished it.
well, some of our work is done.
Yeah. As a parent, that must be a pretty cool part, to play in and know that, that hard work, like my parents did the same thing for me. So, like eternally grateful. How do you deal with like like children changing and I mean, I can only imagine having to cope with children to teenagers to adults. Oh, who
Yes,
should make an owner's manual?
it's
Someone should get on that.
it's challenging. The other day I was at a sorority event, and this friend of mine said, I was asking her what she does for a living, and she said, "Well, I'm a seventh grade science teacher." And I said, "Did you volunteer for teach that age?" And she said, "Yes, I love it." I
Oh,
said, "Well, more power to you." I said, "I thought that the junior high years, I didn't know whether we would survive." I mean, they're truly, their bodies and their psyches are all going through these changes, and, it's uncomfortable for them, and they're learning to be their own person. And it's just very challenging. I found the years from like sixth, seventh, and eighth grade to be the most challenging of all the years for all three of them.
you couldn't pay me enough to go through 10 to 16. I don't think there's a price because you know, turning turning 30 is fun. That's like,
Yeah.
I feel like, the identity development, right? Setting goals, doing what you want, thinking long term. Not only do we have the skills, that we've learned, but like the a little bit of experience. But yeah, I don't know. Children, I don't you guys are parents are, shout out to you because
Well,
I
thank you. I do remember one year as I thought I was going to just not make it through. And I was working at Cal State Fullerton. I had a pretty stressful job, lots of responsibility, but I had one child uh, in each school. So I
Mm,
had one elementary school student, one junior high student, and then one at the high school. So if you can imagine, all three of these schools are on different schedules. They have different teacher in-service days.
Oh,
They have different late start days, they call them. You know,
oh
for one day, for one kid, it might be Wednesday, but for the other kid, it's Thursday. Having to balance getting all these three kids to school. There were times when I got to work and I thought, I've worked an entire full
yeah.
day
Yeah.
and my work day hasn't even started yet. But
Oh,
that was the year where I thought, I'm not going to survive this
oh my
because it's
gosh.
just too much. Um,
Yeah.
and when both parents work, it's like, you know, somebody has to be there when a kid gets sick or when there's a late start day. You know, somebody has to adjust their schedule. And I was very lucky that throughout my career, I usually had a very flexible
That's,
schedule. So
I love
thankfully,
flexibility.
the
That
the,
change.
the parents that you have to really take your hat off to are the parents who worked and schooled their kids during the pandemic. I can't even
Absolutely.
imagine having to do that.
I mean, just the blast of technological influences was so, I feel like it just sent us immediately into the world of AI and tech, and it was, I mean, coping with change with technology. I heard one of my coworkers say that millennials are the only generation that lived with the change of the internet, like, or one of the only, in terms of like into smartphones. Like, millennials have more information on computers and technology than the former generation. So to have to deal with change and bridging that gap has never been a second thought for me. But I thought it was really interesting to see it from that concept, because I
Yes.
remember I didn't have any type of, I had dial up like in junior high.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Like when I went to college, it was like, oh, laptops and computers are now a thing. So, I can only imagine what it was like for parents to have to go to work from home, and deal with students both working from home. I don't know how parents do it when they send children to college, especially multiple children. How did you manage having multiple kids in college at once, like financially?
Well, financially, it was a little easier because all three of our kids, without our prompting, decided to go first to community college. So I did have two in college at the same time, but only one was at a university. So I only had one responsible, massive amount of tuition at a time. So each kid only did 2 years of a 4-year college. That helped save us a lot of money, but also we could stagger they weren't all in college at the same time with the same kind of tuition. So I think we were able to do it that way.
That's awesome. I
And
mean,
then we committed to the idea that we would cash flow so that we weren't taking anything out of savings. We were just really living very close to the vest, very conservatively, so that we could pay that tuition every month. Um, and my middle son, the one who lives in San Francisco now, he graduated from UC Berkeley, and he came to us like the next week and he said, I just have to thank you
mm,
for paying for my college tuition and all my books. He said, I know kids my age that have $200,000 of debt.
yep.
And that could take 10, 15, 20 years to pay off. He said, you've given me this wonderful start
Mhm.
that, I really appreciate because I don't feel burdened by, a bunch of debt. So it was worth it. But it was, I won't lie. I mean, it was a struggle to do it, but
Yeah.
we were very fortunate that they all went to community college and that saved a lot of money.
That's such a good strategy. I was going to go to community college, and then I got into Cal State Fullerton. Woo
Yay.
woo. um, so yeah, I mean, how do you, as a parent, and speaking of, parents, almost said students, students of life who are the children in that relationship learn how to cope with change from their parent. So like I remember growing up, my dad was extremely anxious with change, extremely, would do the same thing, had the same job for 35 years, lived in the same city, went to vacation every summer, still do in the same spot. So, traveling, exploring new places like that's not really how I grew up. So, coping with change and finding my own interests like traveling or, backpacking and things like that, I've sort of tried to give myself goals because I really found that being in nature is one of the best things for my mental health. So like whenever I feel like I'm really stressed or overwhelmed, I feel like I just need to get out in nature, either hiking or camping or backpacking. And that's been one of the things that I get to look forward to. It's like, you know, overarching. I also like coping with change. It's like I can have a really stressful day and then, I'm planting, I'm like, oh, accomplishments.
Right. And also, I think what you're saying too is when you have something to look forward to,
Mm.
something that you've scheduled that you know you're going to enjoy, like going backpacking for the weekend or what have you, that really helps you during the week cope with all the little aggravations and
Right.
stressors of a job.
Yeah.
I read something in Real Simple magazine this month that was a story about how you can kind of redesign your life. And
Mhm.
one of the suggestions, it was just a couple paragraphs, was look at your weekend as a vacation.
Yes.
And so many of us, we have to do laundry and we have to do grocery shopping and there's, soccer practice for the kids and there's a million things. But if you took, just took one weekend a month or maybe even 2 months, and you just from Friday night to Monday morning treated it as if you were on vacation, what a relaxing, rejuvenating thing that would be. Instead of I got 8 errands and 3 chores to do on Saturday alone, and then by the time you're done, it's Monday.
I know. And having that, that's such a good piece of advice is, how do you redesign, reprioritize, and having it come back to spending time doing things that you absolutely need, like decompressing or, absolutely taking a time to, even like what you're saying, it's all about perspective. Don't answer any emails on the weekend because, if it's not an emergency, it'll be there, and
Right,
that's the time
exactly.
to work, so that,
That's really important. It's really important because we have social media and we have our phones, we are literally on the job 24/7. And it doesn't even need, like, your job isn't 24/7 technically,
Mhm.
but because you're tethered to your computer and your phone, your smartphone, you're seeing work stuff 24/7. And I think it's that low level of stress that gets to most of us in the end, is this constant bombardment of never being able to, like, take
Complete.
a breather from it.
Yeah, that's so true. I didn't really think of like that constant, that's why some people they quit their job and they move to another state or they
Right.
literally reinvent what they're doing so that, they can have a fresh start. For some people that works. I think places, things like moving, the death of a loved one or marriage or, having a child, dealing with your children changing on top of your own life things. It's kind of like how I'm curious as to how people manage that low level stress, on
Yeah.
top of these things, when you take a step back and you say, like, this is my situation, this is what I'm lacking. How do I get that? Whether it's, lack of joy or passion in your workplace or, dealing with a challenge at home, I think finding time to decompress and
Hmm.
really check out of that low level stress even is crucial.
One of the other suggestions in that same story was check in with yourself throughout the day. So,
Right.
asking yourself, how am I feeling right now? What is it that I need at this particular moment?
Hmm.
Um, what what did I just go through? What was the experience of this meeting? How did it go? How do I feel about it? What do I need to do moving forward? And that whole idea of checking in with yourself throughout the day, I think so many of us, we just get really busy with the job that's in front of us, and we don't check in with ourselves. But if we did, say your body said, I really need water, I need to go and get hydrated. Or how about if I take a 10-minute walk outside so that I can get some fresh air, I can see nature, I
Hmm.
can kind of readjust myself. It only takes 10 minutes, and it can completely change your perspective. But you wouldn't know to do it unless you were constantly checking in, like, how am I feeling now? What is it that I need? And I thought that was such a great idea. And it's kind of like what you were saying about perspective.
Hmm. Absolutely. That those are two really good. If anybody takes things away from these podcasts, two tips so far. One, be aware of low level stress, whether it's work, family. I think a lot of us forget that, including myself. And then you just kind of go about your day. Be aware of the low level stress. And then two, sounds like a great recommendation would be to check in with yourself a few times a day. So, I mean, it's almost like we need to not only recognize what the change is, but then redirect to those two things of like, here's my other low level stress. This is what's causing it to be overwhelming. How do I check in with myself and prioritize that, the check ins, rather than the tasks? That's what
Right.
to
And
do.
it also helps. I'm sure you've found this now that you're a newlywed, but it helps to have a partner either at work or at home who you can kind of unload with, but in the
Right.
sense of, hey, this happened, help me put it into perspective. And the other person can listen and really, from an outside perspective, of an objective perspective, can put things in context.
Absolutely.
So much of the time you're just overworked and stressed out when you come home.
Mhm.
It helps to unload on another person and to say, this happened, this happened, this happened, I'm not sure how to feel about this.
Mhm.
They have an objective perspective, and they care about you, so
Right.
they can steer you in the right direction, kind
Yeah.
of hone in on how you should be thinking about things instead of maybe how you are thinking about things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, supportive families, supportive partners. That's the goal, right? I mean, I was talking to my mom the other day and I was like, there's so many things happening. I forget it was, stuff at work and it was all kind of compounding at the same time. And my computer was broken. So that was really fun. So I was like, and then this stuff's on hold. And I just kind of like offloaded for 20 minutes. And she was like, yeah, you really needed to do that. I was like, yes, thank you. I feel so much better. I think third tip, relying on our support groups for sure. And like
Yes.
finding supportive people that can kind of be on this life journey with you. So,
And I think that that's really critical and very difficult when you're a control freak. You
me.
know, you tend to just bottle it all up and think, I've got to handle it. This is my stuff. I got to handle it myself.
Mm.
But really, part of being a good partner is showing that vulnerability, and and it's very flattering to your partner to be asked, what do you think about this? Can you help me put this into perspective? That people love to be needed. And I know I really appreciate it when my husband comes to me and wants to talk about something. It's flattering to me that he cares about what I think, you know?
Yeah. Getting that insight too and seeing what objectively someone else would think with the change, or with just being overwhelmed, I think is great, definitely.
And sometimes it's just listening, you know,
Right.
you want somebody to listen to you talk about all these, 10, 15, 20 stressors that you had during the day at work and how frustrated you are. And just having somebody listen to it is really helpful.
Kind of like this. I feel like this was great for us to chat. I'm so glad. Thank you for dealing with
Sure.
change and coping with change. I know we've rescheduled this and so many different times, but I really appreciate it. So, um, yeah. I mean, if there's any thoughts on change, I feel like we covered a lot of great topics, a lot of great things. Um, Anybody who's listening or watching right now, be sure to check out the current blogs and current YouTube episodes of the Write Her podcast. Lots of great things. We talk about work, motherhood, coping with change, communication, a lot of different tips and topics. So, Kathy, is there anything else we should recommend for folks or want to chat about coping with change?
I guess my only thinking is that, you have to give yourself grace.
Oh,
Just like you give your friend grace in not being perfect, not being in control all the time, not always having the answers, you have to give yourself that same grace. And I think that most of us, especially career women, were taught never show weakness, always be in control.
but
And for us to be
flexible. That's what they
to be
teach.
that vulnerable,
Yeah,
you
be
know,
vulnerable, but be in control, but also be flexible. It's like the how do you meet that need?
right. It's pretty impossible. So giving yourself grace that you know it's impossible and you're doing your best.
You heard it here, folks. Give yourself grace. If you haven't given yourself anything today, be aware of low level stress, have a partner or support group that will help you, listen to you, give you guidance, and just give yourself grace. Give yourself grace and check in with yourself. Awesome.
Right. Right.
It's
Well,
been
thank you. This
so
was
It's
lovely.
been so fun chatting with you every time. I think we always just feel like I just gab every time, but we come to some great recommendations from our experiences. So I hope folks out there find benefit to it too.
Me too. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Well, thank you everybody for listening and watching. And we hope you tune in for the next episode of the Write Her podcast. Be sure to follow Kathy Douglas on all social media platforms and check out kathydouglas.com. Bye, everyone.
Bye.